My name is Harold James, and I'm 82 years old, living in a small retirement community in sunny California. Before I arrived here, I spent a few challenging years in a nursing home that I chose for myself, convinced it was the perfect solution for my golden years. Looking back, that decision has become one of my deepest regrets. I'm not here to scare you or paint an entirely grim picture. I simply want to share my personal story so you can make a better choice for yourself or for someone you love. In my younger days, I was independent and sure of my ability to take care of myself, but age brings its own surprises. Mobility issues, a few health scares, and the sudden realization that I needed more help. The idea of a nursing home seemed logical. I believed I would receive professional care, daily companionship, and a sense of security. Instead, I found myself grappling with loneliness, frustration, and a series of unintended consequences. These regrets might resonate with you if you've ever hesitated about taking that step, or if you know someone in the same predicament. Over time, I've come to see there are ways to protect yourself from common pitfalls, so please stick around. I'm about to share 6 regrets, my personal lessons from living in a nursing home. Each one tells a story of a problem, the consequences of ignoring it, and a clear warning for you to take to heart. If any of these lessons sound familiar, drop a comment with the number that hits you hardest, whether it's 2, 4, or 6. Let's have a real conversation, and maybe together we can help more people avoid the struggles I went through. And hey, don't forget to like this video and subscribe if you find it helpful. Let's begin. Regret 1. Believing professional care automatically equals personal care. When I first toured the nursing home, I was dazzled by the spotless hallways, the smiling staff, and the professional brochures that promised expert medical care around the clock. I still remember the moment I walked into the lobby. They had a pleasant scent of lavender and fresh linens, big posters showing happy residents playing bingo, and a friendly tour guide who spoke eloquently about daily social activity. At 78, I thought, this is it, this place will be my safe haven. The problem: I equated professional care with personal attention. Just because a facility has trained nurses doesn't mean each resident receives individualized care. You might get your medications on time, sure, but it doesn't guarantee a heartfelt conversation or a hug when you need it. I learned that a nursing home can feel institutional no matter how fancy if the staff is stretched thin or procedures overshadow genuine human connection. During my stay, the nurses and aides were often juggling tasks for dozens of residents. One aide might be responsible for checking blood pressure, helping with showers, and distributing meals. They did their best, but there simply weren't enough hours in the day for them to sit down and ask about my grandchildren or reminisce about my travels in my youth. Often I felt like just another name on a clipboard. Mr. James, blood pressure stable, medication at 8 a.m. I craved more warmth, more personal interaction. That was something I'd rarely get because the staff was always rushing to the next person. The consequence: loneliness crept in despite being surrounded by people. Sure, I wasn't isolated at home, but inside that nursing home I felt unseen. It was a loneliness that felt heavier because others were physically close, yet emotionally distant. I had once believed that having professionals around would be comforting. Instead, I ended up missing the personal support I used to get from friendly neighbors, or even the postal carrier who would ask me how my garden was doing. When you're in a place that's supposed to cater to your needs but struggles to meet them on a personal level, the loneliness stings harder. The warning: ask yourself, do you want a place that treats you like a patient, or do you want a place where you can still feel like an individual with a lifetime of stories? Before you or someone you care about commits to a nursing home, examine how the staff interacts with current residents. Watch their body language. Listen to the tone in their voice. Ask them directly, how many residents do you typically care for each day? Do you have time to chat with them, not just assist with tasks? Don't be swayed only by clean floors and polite greetings. Look deeper for signs of genuine compassion. If you've ever felt that difference between professional and personal care, drop me a quick comment with the number 1.81. It's important we share these insights. People often assume that a well-credentialed facility means they'll be nurtured, but credentials alone won't hug you when you're having a bad day. By the way, please remember to subscribe. There's plenty more I'd love to share about navigating these later years of life, and I want to keep you in the loop for future videos. Regret 2. Underestimating the impact of limited freedom and routines. Back in my own home, I used to decide when I wanted to wake up, what I wanted for breakfast, and whether I felt like stepping into my backyard to watch the birds. Those small freedoms were part of my daily joy. I remember whistling a tune while making my morning coffee, or sometimes skipping breakfast altogether if I felt like sleeping in. Nobody questioned my choices because they were mine to make. But in the nursing home, freedom suddenly felt like a luxury. The problem: I didn't realize how important everyday independence is until it was gone. Nursing homes often follow a strict schedule: breakfast at 7:30 IEMIM, lunch at noon, dinner at 5 p.m. Bathing schedules might be fixed. You bathe on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays at a certain time. Activities are set: bingo at 10 IEMIM, physical therapy at 2 p.m., then lights out by 9 p.m. For someone used to controlling their own schedule for 8 decades, having such rigid structure can feel suffocating. At first, I told myself it was just a matter of adaptation. I'm an old man, I thought. I can adjust to a schedule, no big deal. But it did turn into a big deal. My sense of agency, my right to decide what I do with my time, was diminished. When a nurse knocks on your door at 6:30 in the morning telling you it's time to get ready for breakfast, there's little room to argue if you're supposed to follow the home's routine, and if you don't comply, you risk missing the meal or being labeled difficult. The consequence: the loss of independence can chip away at one's self-worth. It definitely affected me. I started feeling like I was a child again, being instructed when to go here and when to do that. I found myself missing the spontaneous moments, like deciding I wanted to play my records at 11 p.m. or planting tomatoes in my backyard on a random Wednesday. Over time, this limited freedom led me to feel frustrated and resentful. I remember snapping at the staff once because they insisted on me attending a group exercise session I didn't want. They meant well, but I felt I had lost the choice to say no without repercussions. I also felt smaller in front of my family who visited occasionally. I'd say things like, "I wish I could choose what time to have dinner," and they'd look at me with pity. It was embarrassing to explain that I had to adhere to a schedule I didn't create. My grandchildren would say, "Grandpa, why don't you just go to the dining hall later?" They didn't understand how a system can be more rigid than it appears from the outside. The warning: don't underestimate how much these day-to-day freedoms matter for your emotional health. Nursing homes typically set rigid schedules to keep operations running smoothly, and that's understandable, but ask yourself, or your loved one, how important is it to be able to choose when to eat, sleep, or participate in activities? Some facilities offer more flexibility than others. Ask about meal times, ask about personal preferences, and see if they listen. If you've ever felt the sting of losing your daily freedoms, I want to hear from you. Share your experience in the comments with 2. And hey, if you find this information valuable, please give this video a thumbs up. Every bit of support helps me reach someone else who's on the verge of making a life-changing decision. Don't forget to subscribe too. You never know who might benefit from hearing these stories. Regret 3. Thinking family would visit more if I was in a central location. When I sold my home and moved into the nursing facility, I reassured myself with the idea that my children and grandchildren would visit more often. After all, the nursing home was closer to their part of town and had more convenient visiting hours. I pictured them popping in for surprise visits, bringing homemade cookies, or perhaps even joining me for on-site activities. For a moment, I believed that being in a central location would automatically translate to more family togetherness. The problem: proximity doesn't guarantee presence. People get busy, especially in a fast-paced place like the United States. My sons and daughters had full-time jobs, children's soccer games, and errands to run on weekends. A mere 15-minute driving distance to the nursing home sounded straightforward in theory, but in reality the trip still required time and planning, and so the visits I imagined started off promising. There was an initial excitement about Grandpa's new place, but as months went by, those visits became less frequent. In fact, ironically, I saw my family less in the nursing home than I did when I was still in my old house. I recall one particular Saturday I sat in the lobby from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., eagerly expecting one of my children to drop by. I had told them earlier in the week, "Stop by any time Saturday, I'll be here." But it turned out everyone was caught up in errands or last-minute changes of plan. The hours dragged on, and by the evening I felt like a statue in that lobby, watching families come and go. Eventually, a kind nurse said, "Mr. James, are you waiting for someone?" I just nodded and muttered, "Not anymore." The consequence, feeling abandoned, whether intentional or not, brought on a deeper sense of isolation. There's a hollow sort of sorrow that comes with expecting a knock at your door and hearing only silence. I started to blame myself, wondering if my children found me boring or if the nursing home environment discouraged them. My imagination ran wild with insecurities. Did the grandkids find it depressing here? Was I no longer fun to be around? Over time, I almost lost the desire to invite them because the disappointment hurt more each time they couldn't come. This regret cuts deep, and it's not that I resent my family, rather, I regret that I assumed location would solve all the challenges of family visits. Life continues to move at its own pace, whether you're 2 miles away or 2 hours away. The warning: a more convenient address won't automatically ensure more visits. Before you choose a nursing home, have a genuine conversation with your loved ones. Ask them if they realistically see themselves visiting more often. If they hesitate or seem unsure, that's a sign to reconsider your expectations. Sometimes it might be better to plan occasional extended stays at your home or consider ways to maintain your independence while still staying close to family. Think about adding home care support or exploring a senior living community that offers flexible, family-friendly events. If you believed, like I did, that a central location would guarantee family visits and found out the hard way that it doesn't, please comment with 3D. It's a tough realization, but sharing it might help someone else evaluate their expectations and plan better. And once again, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. You never know when a future video might speak directly to your heart. Regret 4. Overlooking the emotional toll of watching other residents decline. One aspect I didn't anticipate was how emotionally taxing it could be to live among many people who were in varying states of decline. When I walked through the halls during my initial visit, I saw some residents happily chatting in the recreation room, others were engaged in a painting class, and a few were playing cards in the lounge. It seemed lively, but behind that upbeat facade, there were also many who were bedridden or suffering from dementia. I didn't fully appreciate how bearing witness to their daily struggles would affect me in the long run. The problem: being surrounded by frailty and illness can create a constant emotional reminder of your own mortality. In my first year at the nursing home, I made friends with a lovely gentleman named Robert. We bonded over old jazz records and would chat about everything from politics to the best recipes for homemade chili. Over a few months, his health took a turn for the worse. I watched him go from walking steadily down the hallway to needing a wheelchair and eventually being confined to bed. Each day, I'd pass by his room and see him deteriorating, bit by bit. This repeated itself more times than I care to count. Sometimes a resident would move in looking relatively healthy, and then you'd watch them slip away over weeks or months. Funerals and memorial services became a regular part of the community calendar. Many nights I lay awake thinking, will that be me next year, next month? It was a heavy emotional burden, and I hadn't prepared for it. The consequence, I began to feel depressed, an unshakable sadness that loomed over me. It wasn't just my own problems anymore. It was the sorrow of seeing neighbors, people I shared meals with, losing their memory, losing their mobility, and sometimes passing away quietly. It can be deeply unsettling to witness this on a near daily basis, especially when you're grappling with your own vulnerability. There were moments I almost dreaded leaving my room because I couldn't bear to see another friend in decline. This emotional weight also affected my willingness to participate in social events. The facility would plan group activities, but my heart wasn't always in it. Sometimes I'd show up and see an empty chair, belonging to someone who is now in the hospital or no longer with us. I remember the staff encouraging us to be resilient, but resilience is easier said than done when you're reminded of mortality everywhere you look. The warning: if you or a loved one is considering a nursing home, realize that the environment can be both supportive and heavy. Ask yourself, how will I cope with the emotional toll of seeing others decline? Some people have a strong psychological constitution and can accept these realities with grace. Others, like me, find it overwhelming. I strongly suggest researching communities that offer robust mental health support or counseling services. Having someone to talk to, a therapist, a chaplain, or even a volunteer, can make a difference. Some facilities organize grief support groups, which can help mitigate this emotional drain. If you've ever felt weighed down by witnessing decline and loss, share your experience with 4 in the comments. Let us know how you handled it or how you're managing it now. And please, if this resonates with you, don't forget to like this video so others can discover these insights. This is not an easy conversation, but it's essential. Regret 5. Not advocating enough for my own care. When I first moved in, I thought the staff would naturally track every aspect of my well-being, from diet to social needs to emotional health. I figured they'd call the shots, and I'd follow. However, that passivity turned out to be a mistake. Just because professionals are on hand doesn't mean they know what's best for you in every situation, or that they're always aware when something is bothering you. The problem: I didn't speak up enough about my needs. You see, I grew up in an era when you didn't question authority figures, doctors, nurses, or staff in charge. I believed if they saw I was sad or depressed, they'd automatically arrange counseling. If they noticed changes in my appetite, they'd tweak my meal plan. But nursing homes can be incredibly busy environments, and if you don't actively voice your concerns, they might go unnoticed. For instance, after a few months, I began experiencing severe back pain. I assumed the staff would see me wince or notice my difficulty sitting down at the dining table, yet nobody asked. They had too many residents to look after. The onus was on me to say, "Excuse me, I'm in pain, I need help," but I didn't. I waited, and my condition worsened until I was taken to the hospital for a major spinal issue that could have been addressed earlier. The consequence: delayed medical attention and neglected emotional needs. My back problem turned into a prolonged hospital stay, followed by a longer recovery. Because I failed to raise my hand and speak up, I suffered more than necessary. Meanwhile, day by day, my emotional well-being also deteriorated. I felt unheard, but part of that was my own doing. I was so used to not making a fuss that I ended up letting my own care slip through the cracks. Another dimension to this regret was related to my personal preferences, like wanting certain foods or requesting specific activities. I assumed the facility would note my interests from the initial intake and then automatically accommodate me. Not so. It was more like a one-size-fits-all schedule. Had I advocated more from the start, maybe I would have enjoyed a wider range of hobbies or received a personalized diet that took into account my tastes. The warning: in a nursing home setting, you can't just rely on others to interpret your needs perfectly. You have to be your own advocate or have a family member or friend who can step in. If you or your loved one doesn't speak up, the staff won't always guess. Request a care plan meeting. Ask questions. How are you monitoring my pain? Can we adjust my meal plan? Is there a way for me to try a different physical therapy routine? Don't wait for them to come to you. If you've had an experience where you or a loved one didn't speak up in time, I'd love to hear it. Type 5 in the comments to let me know I'm not alone in this. Sometimes admitting our regrets can be the very thing that helps someone else avoid them. And again, if you find these insights meaningful, do consider subscribing so we can keep this conversation going. Regret 6. failing to plan an exit strategy, and feeling stuck. When I moved into the nursing home, I treated it like a permanent solution. I didn't plan for the possibility that I might want to leave one day. But life changes, and so do health conditions, financial situations, and personal preferences. There might come a time when you feel the nursing home no longer serves your best interests, but by then the hurdles to leave can be significant. The problem: I didn't ask about the terms for leaving or transitioning. I didn't consider whether I could eventually move to a simpler assisted living arrangement or possibly return to a smaller private residence with some in-home care. So when I decided, after a year and a half, that the nursing home environment was too restrictive for me, I realized I was stuck in a web of financial and logistical complications. I had sold my house, used part of the proceeds to pay the nursing home fees, and had a long-term contract that was expensive to break. I also had become dependent on certain services they provided. Transitioning out would require coordinating new caregivers, possibly moving to another town or burdening family members who weren't prepared to have me back. It felt like I had fallen into a trap of my own making. No one forced me, but my lack of foresight cornered me. The consequence: a sense of being trapped. I spent months feeling powerless. When I talked to my children about leaving, they hesitated because they had already arranged their schedules around my being in the nursing home. They assumed I was fine there. Financially, pulling out early meant I'd lose a chunk of my initial deposit. It was a complicated process, filled with legal paperwork and emotional stress. For a while, I simply gave up on the idea and resigned myself to living in an environment that no longer felt right. Emotionally, that resignation was like a slow poison. It kept me from seeking creative solutions. It made me bitter at times. I thought, this is what my life is now, and there's no turning back. It's a terrible feeling to believe you have no exit options in your later years. I recall reading a quote by the beloved Dr. Seuss that says, "You have brains in your head, you have feet in your shoes, you can steer yourself any direction you choose." In theory, that's true at any age, if you plan for it. I hadn't. A warning: always consider an exit strategy before you move in. Ask about month-to-month options versus long-term contracts. Explore whether there are transitional communities that allow you to step down or step up levels of care as needed. Also, keep in mind that if you sell your house to fund a nursing home stay, you might want to set aside a portion of those funds in case your plans change. Don't assume you'll be there for the rest of your life unless you fully research the impact. If you've ever felt stuck in a living situation you wish you could change, share your story with 6 in the comments. Let's remind each other that planning isn't just for the young. We can plan at any stage of life, but the earlier we do it, the easier it is to pivot when circumstances shift. As we conclude, I invite you to think deeply about these lessons and share this video with a friend or family member who might benefit. Don't forget to subscribe so you can stay connected with upcoming content geared toward helping seniors and their loved ones navigate the complexities of aging. And please, leave a comment, whether it's 2 to 4 or 6, to let me know which regret resonates with you the most. Remember, you're not alone in this journey. There's a community of us out here learning from each other's stories every single day. Thank you for listening to my reflections. I hope my regrets become your guidance. Take care, stay true to yourself, and never stop asking the important questions, no matter your age. God bless.